Hi, my name is Jack Schropp. I'm a former commander of the Navy SEALs. I was in the Navy for 24 years, 4 at the Naval Academy and 20 in the fleet, as they say. And I've been asked to read some portions of my book that I wrote, and that book is called Unbeatable: How to Recreate Your Life Using the Secrets of a Navy SEAL. And the book was written in 2003. And so what I'm about is to be able to widen the number of people who have seen this and give you sort of a taste of one chapter of the book. So I'm going to begin. I will be glancing at my own book because as a Navy SEAL you don't run around with a book. You're too busy being what I'm going to talk to you about here. And so that may seem a little strange, kind of like I'm putting people to sleep or to bed or like children. That's not my intention. So here we go. So I'm reading from a chapter called Be a Volunteer. That's the first chapter I'm reading today. It's not the first chapter of the book. There's prefaces, etc. And this particular secret, as I call them, they're not really secrets. A lot of people have discovered stuff like this, but this is my version of it. And the first secret is called being a volunteer. So I distinguish in the book the difference between being a volunteer in life, where you put yourself into life, knowing full well that you won't have the answers to almost anything in your life once you make that commitment to be a volunteer. And the other side, the only other side that's available, is called being a victim. And for those of you who are sitting there thinking to yourself, well, I'm not a victim, I do this and this and this. Well, just hang on for a second here. What I mean by someone who's a volunteer is someone who's committed to actions that make things workable for yourself and at large with the people that you know. So for example, I don't hang out with bank robbers. Why? Because that doesn't work. If I were to do that, I would be in the category called a victim. And by the way, there's lots of them. They go to jail. And the ones that don't aren't exactly happy. So there's a victim and there's a volunteer. And if you can distinguish what your internal dialogue is, what goes on inside what you call your thinking, you'll start to distinguish some areas of your life where you do not practice being a volunteer. So, and all of those things inside your head, inside your a little conversation that runs, is nothing more than opinions, excuses, reasons, all the stuff that you can write books about or stories, but it doesn't give you any access, for example, to writing a book, telling stories, or any other activity. This is about you being a volunteer that you create because you speak that way. You say that you are a volunteer. And then the trick is to be able to distinguish when the victim comes up. It's too cold. I don't feel like it. My nose is running. Nobody loves me. My mother was a terrible burden in my life. My father did this and that, and so forth and so on. All of that, every human being contains. I don't care what country you go to, there isn't a single person that doesn't have categories called volunteer or victim. And at any given moment, you could be being a volunteer and happy and moving forward and making things happen, and then all of a sudden a thought comes into your head, and the next thing you know, you're whining and sniffling. I didn't get paid enough. I didn't, like that. So the victim volunteer is a way to distinguish something that'll allow you to deal with that which is not serving you. Those conversations that you react to and which produce reactions instead of creations. So, some examples of victimization. Well, I've already mentioned some of them. It's what you're listening to inside here. I once had a man in a course that I was leading who stood up and said, well, I don't have any, I don't victimize myself. I don't complain about anything. It was the first and last time I ever heard this from anybody. And I said, really, you've never had a complaint and you're happy about everything? And he said, yes. And this guy was not, he was older than me, which is not quite as old as dirt, but in any event, I said, so I'd like you to go home tonight when the course is over for the day. When you go home, I'd like you to ask your wife, you're married, yes? And he said, yes. I said, and go to your wife and ask her, do you complain a lot, or do you complain at all? And he just looked at me like he was stunned, like he didn't know what I was talking about. So I asked him again, I said, would you go home and say that to your wife? Okay. The next day he came back, and I looked for him in the crowd, in the group here, and I said, oh, where is so-and-so? And he stood up. I said, so how did it go with your wife last night? And he said, well, I found out that I have a lot of complaints. I said, like what? He said, well, my complaints are all silent. I talk to myself. And my wife knows exactly what's going on because she told me what the complaints were. She told me what my complaints were. But I was listening to it. The man. And needless to say, people, or maybe it is useful to say, the whole room started laughing. So he had spent most of his life being silent, quiet, strong, silent type. So everybody's got him, and if you're walking around like, I don't have any complaints at all, you're so full of it, the stink's reaching me now. So please, release that little, whatever name you want to give to it, and drop it in a roadside farm so that they can at least get the fertilizer use out of it. Now, if you think that I've got this mastered, that is about complaints and whining and being reasonable instead of being powerful, well, I'm a human being. I don't know any human beings that have turned into white light. You may go to places where they tell you you can get white light someday. I don't know about that. That's not my business. What I do know is that I complain a lot. The difference between me or a Navy SEAL and several other types of people, doctors, emergency room doctors, etc., you don't have time for the doctor to be nice to the nurse if she's not doing her job, because they're working moment by moment to save lives. So I'm not representing here that I've escaped something. What I have is a technology to have people be able to see it and let it go. It may come back later, but put it aside and deal with what's going on now. When I was leading courses and while I was in the Navy, people would come up to me who weren't Navy SEALs, and they would say to me, you guys must really be happy. I mean, you don't complain about anything, do you? And I started laughing. I said, of course we complain. You got to be kidding me. I put you in a swamp, and there's a bunch of people out looking for you, and they're not wanting to take you to the dance, and you're laying there, and let's say it's at nighttime, and you hear this noise that you're sitting on a stream, about 10 guys sitting on a stream, waiting for those guys that are coming to get us. And you hear this noise, and it sounds like somebody swimming the breaststroke, which happened to me. And the next morning when we came out, we had no contact. Nobody came by. And I got on this boat on the river, and we were going back to our base. I said to one of the enlisted men, "What was that noise that I heard in the stream last night?" He said, "What noise?" I said, "Well, there was a noise. It sounded like, I don't know, like a guy swimming the breaststroke." He said, "Oh, no, that's the crocodiles." I said, "Get out of here." This was my first day in Vietnam on my second tour. I said, "You're just trying to..." He said, "No, sir, there's crocodiles." And we're steaming up the river. And he says, look over there." And I looked over there, and on the bank was a couple of crocodiles. And they plopped into the water. And I'm thinking, I was sitting right at times in the water, or when the tide went out, just short of the water. And I was like, "Oh, this is really fun. This is really great, Jack. You got yourself into this thing. You were even excited about coming here." Well, forget about excitement. You need to get to work and pay attention, because you're the last one to know it in this particular group. So, yeah, we complain a lot. We actually have it as an art in some cases, where we complain just to hear how funny the other people sound, and we would take turns. So you're not going to stop being a human being. Sorry. Well, actually you will, but most people don't like to discuss it. There comes a day when you won't be a human being anymore. I don't know if your mother told you, but if she did tell you, she did her job. If she didn't, she's protecting you and makes you not very powerful. So, for right now, that's my little words of wisdom for, well, I don't know if they're wisdom. I have a book here that I wrote. But you see, I don't memorize this because I'm too busy being what this is. It took me and my wife and a whole bunch of people to participate in the background in creating this book. But I thank you for listening. I hope that you realize something out of it. And I look forward to talking to you at another time. And that's it.